Okay, I thought I'd do another finishing video. This is a nightstand with the lamp black paint. It's a milk paint by General Finishes that was on it. I've sanded it a little bit just so you can see that I'm going to actually be sanding it and not using a stripper or anything. The first thing we're going to do is, once we strip it down, is we're going to use the Java Gel by General Finishes on it. It is oil based. Then we're going to put a shellac on it. This is going to be cut, and that shellac is going to seal the coat of Java in so that I can put a water-based finish on it. It's going to be flat, so that kind of makes it look a little bit more like store-bought furniture with the flat, and it's also what my daughter wants on it. So anyway, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to try to show you all the steps, and hopefully this can help you try to do your own. So anyway. Okay, after a lot of sanding, and it took me about all day to do it. And after I sanded with the power sander, you will leave swirl marks and things like that if you're not careful when you're sanding with the power sanders. So I use a hand sander with the same grit. So I started at 120 to get all the paint off, and then I took the hand sander and sanded with 120. Then I went to 150 with the power sander, and then after that was done, I went ahead, sanded by hand again with 150 grit to make sure I don't have any swirl marks. So you'll get that typically when you have soft wood like this. This is really soft wood. If you're doing poplar, just maple, things like that with soft wood, you will pretty much can guarantee you're going to get some of these little marks in it. They call them pigtails. So if you're using a random orbit sander. So if you do it by hand, you're fine. But anyway, go through everything with the grain by hand to make sure everything's good, and then of course tack it off. It's important to tack it off so you don't ruin your stain. So you'll basically contaminate the stain if you don't tack it off real well, because obviously when we put the Java on, we're going to wipe it off really good. I don't do the kind of stain where you put it on and you let it look like paint. I put it on, and then we're going to wipe it completely off as much as we can. And you also go with the grain. And then these corners, you never want to wipe this way when we're taking the stain off. So I'm going to show you how I do it. Basically, I'm going to pull from the corners out, and it's very important to do that. Otherwise, you will get lines where you pulled that stain off. For some reason, it's happened before, so I've learned my lesson a long time ago to not pull the stain off this way. So anyway, I'll try to zoom in on that and show you how I do the stain, and then we'll get to putting some shellac on there to seal the coat in, and then we'll finally put a finish on it. So let's get started. Okay, I'm back after about 36 to 38 hours of dry time. Now, I waited 24 hours and I put a second coat on here. It's much darker now, and that's what I like. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and mix up that shellac. I'll show you how to do that. And I'm only going to apply it on the top and on this back piece, because once you get that down, you'll be able to do the rest of it. And then we'll move on to the next stage. Okay, it's time to shellac the nightstand. We're going to be using the seal coat. This is a pre-mix shellac instead of using flakes. Now this is mixed at a 2-pound cut, meaning 2 pounds of shellac flakes to 1 gallon of denatured alcohol. This is actually still too thick, so I don't use it that way. It is important to make sure that this stuff doesn't get old. That's one of the drawbacks of using pre-mixed. So what we want to do is, without getting too technical and doing a bunch of measuring, I basically use one of these. It's a dropper that you would use for like medicine or whatever, but you can use whatever you need to do. But we're basically going to do 2 parts of this already cut out of the can, 2 parts of this, to 6 parts of this denatured alcohol. And you can buy this anywhere. You can also buy this at Home Depot, Lowe's, or Woodcraft, Rockler, wherever, okay? This is some that's already mixed, thinned out, so this is good to go too, and this is what I'll be using, and it's the same ratio, 2 to 6 of these. I won't get into actually showing you how I squirted in the bottles or anything, but we are going to use an application pad. You don't want to use a foam brush and stuff like that because you'll get run lines, or it's susceptible to that. So what I do is I take one of these, which is a t-shirt cut up, and then I cut up another part of it and ball it up and put it inside of this one. This uses a rubber band. Shellac, in the way where we're using it is so we can trap the oil base and seal it off, because it's already dried, but we want to seal that off, and then we also want to enrich in it. So it will actually, you can see a difference in this piece of wood that I put some shellac on. Basically, it'll make it a little bit deeper, and when we put a water-based finish on something, it's not very deep. There's not a lot of depth with it, but we want it to be a flat finish, so that's what we're doing in this case, and that's why we're using shellac. And we're just trying to seal off the wood. So once that dries, you can actually, after a couple hours, you can actually go ahead and put your finish on. Now, if you see a spot that's heavier, or you maybe like I see a spot right here, I'm gonna go ahead and put it on there and do another light pass on it. and see if that will come up. But basically, you should get a nice smooth finish, very uniform. If not, we just put another one on here because it bonds to itself. So we can actually put another coat on if we want. It's basically all sealed up now. As you can see, that this is already dry by the time I'm over here. So it dries that fast. And you get a nice sheen on it. Then when I'm not using this, I put this into a sealed container and it'll stay wet. And you can, shellac can always be reactivated, so. And then, of course, the cleanup is denatured alcohol on your hands or whatever. So, okay, we're back after 3 or 4 hours. I had to wait till it cooled down a little bit in the garage. So it's definitely dry. Like I said, it dries. The shellac dries really fast, so it's not a problem. We're gonna use some flat water-based. This is the General Finish brand, and we've got our tack cloth because you're going to want to tack everything down and make sure, nothing, got on it. Occasionally, you might have to sand. I did have to sand very lightly with 400 or 600 grit sandpaper with the grain. And that's just because sometimes the shellac will get really rough. So you don't want a real rough patch because that might affect the look of it later, even though the finish is really what you're going to flatten out. I mean, you could put it over it, but it'll take too many coats. You don't want to do that with flat. If you're going to put 3 or 4 coats of flat, don't put all the coats in flat. So don't put 4 or 5 coats of flat on there because that's too many coats of flat. You don't really need that many. You can use another type, so you could use a satin or semi-gloss in the water-based and put on a couple of coats. If you're going to do it that way, put a couple coats on, and then you can put the last 2 coats with the flat, and it'll still give you that flat matte. So anyway, we're going to do 2 coats on ours, and so we're just going to stick with using the flat the whole time. So anyway, this is how I put it on with a foam brush. Make sure everything's good. You want to make sure everything is stirred up really well. Even if it's been sitting there for only 2 hours, I would still re-stir it because otherwise the flat might not come out flat. And always pull to the edge. End up pulling to the edge every time. Goes on really fast. And it dries very fast. In another 3 or 4 hours, I'm going to be putting on the second coat. Now, I won't be filming that just because it looks exactly like it does right now. So, you do want to sand in between. I use 400 grit sandpaper. You don't want anything coarse. And all you're trying to do is smooth out the finish. So you want to be in good lighting. If you can have a side light or something where you can have it right at the same plane as the actual item that you're finishing, then that's good. So anyway, hopefully you can see that. Then we'll start on the next one, which is our top. Now the top being the most important, you want to make sure that all your sides are done before you start on your top, so you won't have any marks, so nothing will show. So I'm going to go ahead and actually hold this up. I'm going to do a little under the bottom too. I don't want to have an edge on it. Generally, it's good to unload your brush first and then go ahead and do the sides. Otherwise, you can also get some bad marks, left on there. It'll just be an edge. So we're gonna go ahead and, like this, I just take a little bit off of the brush and make sure I come all the way to the front. And now I've got all the edges done, so now I can actually start. Hopefully you can see that. I'm actually going to shift it. I like to work long ways this way. It's more comfortable. You'll see I'm doing this a little bit different because now my brush has really got a lot of finish on it. So I'm going to actually just go back really fast and then pull it off the edge. And pull from the middle. Especially if we were doing something really large like a table, this is how you'd have to do it. You got to go real fast. Pull this off the edge. And that's it. And the other thing is, if you get like a hair or something on it, because you will, that's going to happen, don't try to touch it. Don't fix it. Just let it go. By the time it dries, it'll be right up on the top of the surface, and then all you have to do is, when you come around next, when you do your sanding, just lightly sand over that area first, and it will pop that hair right back off. And then you can go ahead and sand the rest of it as usual, but always sand with the grain. On the edges, I'm actually sanding this away. So I don't get any marks, like any reflections in light. You're gonna see that if you do not sand with the grain on that. So anyway, we're gonna, I'm not gonna show the whole cabinet, but that's how you apply the finish. Anything on the, so let's pull this in the frame here. Anytime you're doing things like this, where you have a crack here, do the same thing as I did about this, about unloading the brush. Go ahead and do some over here, and then do that crack. Otherwise, you'll have a bead of finish that's too thick, and you'll notice that. So, but what you're doing is you're just unloading the brush, taking some of that off, and then you go ahead, take your brush, and swipe it into that corner, and then come out. And you shouldn't have that big, thick, bead of finish in that crook. So same thing with when we're doing the inside of this, okay, we're actually going to pull out every time. So we're going to pull out this way, and then we're going to pull up from the center. And then that should actually take some of that out of the corner every time. And usually when I do that, I'll actually do in the middle and then come out to here, because then it's unloaded again. You want to do the same thing in the corners. Unload that brush and then pull out from the corners. That will help a lot. So hope this helps you, and then I'll show you what it looks like all finished. Okay, I changed my mind. I think I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that. We'll probably do it a little bit quicker. Put the speed of the video on faster, but so anyway, I tacked it off. Now we're going to go ahead and always work from the inside out. Actually, I don't like to do, one thing you do have to be careful with this stuff drying so fast. So you have a little edge on there. I don't know if you can see that, but I have an edge on here where it's beaded around the corner. So I just take my finger and wipe that off. That way that's not gonna show up later. So that's what you want to do, and that's what I was looking for right here. I didn't want any beading on the edges, because when that dries, that's going to leave a mark. So you don't want that. So anyway, I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to do the outside of the cabinet, and then you'll see the finished result. So hope this helped you. I know it's a long video, but I hope it helped you get a better understanding of how to put the finish on and shellac and everything. So I'll be back with the finished result. Okay, we're back with the nightstand. It's all finished. It's got 2 coats of stain, 3 coats of the water-based polyacrylic on it, and I think it turned out really well. I know my daughter's gonna love it. Let me rotate it around for you. Came out very good. If you have any questions or comments, please post them below. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos from my channel, please subscribe. Thank you. Have a good day.